Okay, I think we'll get started. So I will, unsurprisingly continue kind of on the theme of storytelling and culture that we've been talking about the last few days. I'm going to actually start with a few stories, a few vignettes, and it'll become clear, what the purpose of them is over time. So, a young boy in 1940s London develops an abiding love of chemicals, especially the mysterious tungsten that's used in light filaments. He buys dangerous materials from pharmacies and experiments with them in his garage. As London starts being bombed by the Germans, he's whisked away to a boarding school in the English country where he encounters some great teachers. He goes on to study medicine, moves to the United States, and eventually becomes a professor at NYU, and an acclaimed, world-famous neuroscientist and a prolific author. The Robin Williams film Awakenings is based on one of his experiments. His name is Oliver Sacks. Here's another. Leslie T. Cheng, a correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, publishes a book in 2009 titled Factory Girls, about the 3 years she spends in Dongguan, China, looking at the lives of the tens of millions of migrant workers at the factories there. She tells the story of two ambitious and wide-eyed young women who leave home as teenagers seeking opportunities in the cities, who delay marriage in order to achieve a better station in life, who dream of learning English and read articles with titles like Be Your Own Master and Ambition Made Me Who I Am, who weigh whether to move to different companies that might offer a step up, who cherish their independence and their relationships, and who hunger above all to learn and to grow. Their names are Min and Chung Min. A young black boy growing up in Marcy's projects in Brooklyn sees an older child possessed like the ladies touched by the Spirit in church, rhyming couplets to a group of younger kids. He thinks, I could do that. His mother buys him a 3-ring binder, and he carries it everywhere, scribbling rhymes about the things he sees and hears. He begins to read dictionaries in his spare time to increase his vocabulary. His father leaves his family for good when he's 11. By 13, he's dropped out of school. It's the 1980s, and a crack addiction wave hits New York City. He starts dealing and ends up running a crack distribution network for 13 years in Brooklyn, Trenton, and Maryland, all while writing rhymes in the background. He eventually comes to see both the risks and the ugliness of the drug trade and tries to go full-time into producing music, but he's rejected and finds the recording industry to be equally ugly. He starts his own record label and eventually releases Hard Knock Life, a breakout single that draws parallels between his life and that of little orphan Annie. 15 years later, he and his wife are the wealthiest entertainment couple in America. His name is Sean Carter, better known as Jay-Z. One more. In the early 1900s, in Budapest, Hungary, a young Jewish boy grew up spending much of his earlier years in hospitals undergoing operations for club feet. Starting school late, he works to catch up. He studies textiles in high school and goes on to become a textile manufacturer. One day, he catches one of his employees stealing from him, and in an act of kindness, he forgives the employee and lets him stay on the job and continue working. A decade later, during the Holocaust, he and his family are about to be thrown into a concentration camp, but the prison guard, in a moment of unimaginable coincidence, happens to be that old employee he had forgiven, and he repays the kindness by helping him escape. He goes on to open a textile factory in racially divided South Carolina and opens one of the first integrated factories where black and white workers produce side by side. He also pursues his passion for lifelong learning by becoming a patron of Wofford College. And in 2000, the college honors him for a life of moral courage. His name was Sandor Tesler. These stories are instances of an idea at the foundation of the work that we do. And our talk today is about exploring this foundational idea. A lot of principles today, like that we've heard, constitute what we can call the guidepost philosophy. Right? We have our core values, like revere independence or be a practical idealist. And you've probably heard various other principles that we follow, like mission without martyrdom or follow the child. And we have our broader higher ground mission, which is, quote, to modernize and mainstream the international Montessori movement and thereby enable children across the world to realize their human potential as knowledge-guided, efficacious, value-oriented beings so that they experience undiluted and unimpeded the joyous process of growing up into flourishing adults. Each of these ideas and values and the others that you encounter can be said to be fundamental. They're each important pillars that hold up the entire structure that we're building. But I don't think that they go all the way down. Today I want to introduce an idea that I think is deeper even than all of these. And I want to dig really deep, deeper than our current operations, deeper than our core values, deeper even than our Montessori pedagogy, to the very foundation of what I think is our worldview, the bedrock that everything rests upon. So what is that bedrock idea? The clue is in the vignettes that I started with, and the others that I could go on giving, right? It's in the lives of famous people like Michael Jordan, the basketball legend who was cut from his high school basketball team, Helen Keller, the blind and deaf child who managed to access the wondrous world of human language and communication, Benjamin Franklin, the sage of the revolution who went from printer to scientist to statesman, Kokichi Mokomito, the wise and zestful Japanese founder of Mikimoto Pearls, who flew the American flag outside his home during World War II. It's there in the lives of people who are not famous as well, like my former student who somehow developed a passion for agricultural science and pursued that passion in a special high school program in Mission Viejo that happened to be on agricultural science. The assistant guide who immigrates to this country after years of raising her grandchildren and decides to reach out and try something that's different and that's challenging. It's in the story of the penny-pinching grad student I once knew who wanted to devote his life to the study of teleology, or the high school graduate who joins the Marines to pursue a life of honor and warrior courage, or the Pakistani convenience store owner who works 80-hour weeks to enable his children to pursue something better, or the young girl who works counter at Macy's while writing short stories in her spare time. The basic animating idea at the heart of our work is there for us to see in so many people around us. The butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, all leading a certain type of life. It is the thing that they have in common that is equally true of all of them, however varied their lives. What is it that they have in common? It's that they're fully engaged in the act of living. They're all in wanting things and feeling deeply and learning and growing and experiencing. They're alive in the complete and in the completely human sense of the term. Purposeful, active-minded, immersed in a world of rich and full experiences. The universal, the common core animating these lives is that they all manifest a capacity to engage in concentrated work, the capacity to enjoy things, the willingness to be vulnerable to the possibility of hurt, rather than closed to the things that matter. And I show this through pictures of Greek sculpture because for me, that's what Greek sculpture best embodies. You could think of it as the pursuit of happiness, and that is a true characterization, but it doesn't always look like happiness. It can sometimes look like pain, as an athlete's working morning to night to make a team. Sometimes it is a quiet, constant push in a certain direction. and sometimes it is bright and shiny. It can mean pursuing a career on Wall Street or social work in the slums, or a life of travel, or of contemplating great literature, or any other particular value. Sometimes it means forging your own path, and sometimes it means doing what everyone else does, because that's what you want. Or it means saying no to an opportunity because you'd rather spend more time with your family, or going on vacation rather than taking the promotion because that's what matters more to you. The fact that human beings are capable of such lives, and that a life lived in this way is a treasure not to be betrayed, is the bedrock underneath the whole Guidepost enterprise. It's a sentiment that as I said, I find most represented in Greek antiquity. I don't think any statement has ever captured it so eloquently as the way that the playwright Sophocles put this point 2,000 years ago. And he said, quote, "Numberless are the world's wonders, but none more wonderful than man." And so there's this appreciation of the beauty of everything that life has to offer, but above all, the beauty of the human being, right, and the goodness of the human being. It's a very, very ancient idea. Human life fully lived is a sight to behold. It's a thing unto itself. And the way that I put this point formally is that an individual human life fully lived is an end in itself. That's the big idea. That's the axiom at the bedrock of our work. An individual life fully lived. And that fully lived is key. We are not the only ones in the world to celebrate human life and human uniqueness even, but our view has a certain nuance. We recognize that it is possible to not fully live a life. As human beings, we do not automatically make the most of our lives. We don't have that by default. Each person has a potential to fully live his or her life, but that does not mean that each life actually ends up being fully lived. This is a radical view, that it's not automatic, that it's an achievement. It's the individual life fully lived that's sacred to us. As any opportunity in life can be wasted, so life itself can be wasted. We celebrate and we revere the act of engaging in the process of life and hate the idea of it being wasted through circumstance or especially through poor choices. So our bedrock axiom is that an individual human life fully lived is an end in itself. Two additional points get us from that to our work at Guidepost and to our mission to mainstream Montessori. The first is what I mentioned just now, the understanding that a full life is not a default experience, that it has to be actively pursued. And while the impetus ultimately comes from the individual himself or herself, importantly for us as educators, there are conditions, there are things that we can do, both outside and inside, that make it easier for human beings to pursue this. And particularly in the case of children, we want to help create those conditions, right? So there are things that we can do to help optimize a child's environment to achieve this outcome. And then the second thing is that we yearn for a world full of such individuals, a world full of people leading fully lived lives. And this is why I spent so much time giving so many different examples to kind of stress the point that what we want is to be surrounded by all varieties of such people. We want to create a society in which this type of life is the norm rather than the exception. It's the to be expected. If a life fully lived is not automatic, then there's something we can do about furthering the human ability to lead such lives. And if we want a world of such lives, then it's something we need to do. And our purpose is to create the conditions that give our students the best possible shot at achieving rich, purposeful, fully lived lives, right? We carefully design environments that offer them and their parents the maximal opportunity to develop in this way, which include many things, right? But at root, I think, consists of the ability to think about nature, about humanity, about self, about others. And with that capacity to think comes also the capacity to feel, to act, the confidence and the drive that comes from these things. And finally, the capacity to actually experience it, to not only sow, but also to reap, to relish the living, to enjoy both the work and the fruits of the work. And, just to reiterate that we don't dictate the concrete nature of the good life. We don't decide whether someone pursues a career in sports or music or business or engineering or social work. We say neither that the good life necessarily consists in employment in the STEM fields or in a life of charity work. We don't try to influence how a child or the adult she becomes should make trade-offs between one road and another road, between work and family, dreams and hobbies, time and money, risks and rewards. Our view is that the good life is self-created. And so our job is just to make sure that our students have access to the tools and the early experiences they need to pursue any such path in an informed, self-aware, and optimally prepared way. We want to give every child an opportunity to become a valuer, someone who makes the most out of life and gets the most out of life. That's our objective. So, why is this idea important to understand? The first reason is just because it enriches our own lives to understand it. So it's good practice, right, to reinforce this worldview. Look for individuals leading full lives. Collect their stories. Contemplate and celebrate them. See the richness in the souls of the people around you, in their stories and their ideas and their experiences. Whether you're at happy hour chatting with friends, or watching a biography on the History Channel, or reading about a fictional character, train yourself to notice how interesting and ennobling and just plain good people are. By looking for those type of people in the world, wherever they exist, you end up living in more of a world full of such people. And I think becoming one yourself. As an example, find all of you so interesting. And, I don't know you that well, but I'm just on this premise that there are stories here, and I want to understand those stories, and I want to have access to those stories. And I feel that way every time I meet with guides when I visit a school, and certainly every time I interact with children and their families. It's an important part of why I'm motivated to keep going. I recently visited our school in China and the team that we have there. And actually just about a week ago, sitting at the airport, on the way back, I wrote them an email, just a thank you email. And I think it reflects this idea, so I'm going to share it here with you. Dear team, as I'm getting ready to board my flight, I want to thank each and every one of you for your hospitality, your openness, your enthusiasm, and your energy. I cannot overstate the gratitude I feel towards you for creating and carrying forward our shared mission in China. And I can't wait to see the waves and waves of children and families that you impact. But reflecting a bit today as I leave, I also want to share something else. In addition to being thankful to you for serving our mission, I am feeling equally thankful towards our mission for giving me the opportunity to know and to work with you. Knowing you is its own reward. You're a team of incredible human beings. Your zest for life is evident in so many ways. Your humor and playfulness, your creativity and intensity of purpose, your talent and conviction. Each of your personal life stories is like a fascinating, powerful, world-class novel, and I'm lucky to have the opportunity to read a few pages here and there. And I can say this equally to all of you. Our goal at Higher Ground is to create a new and better world that doesn't exist yet. It's the world that I want to create for my own children and for all children. This week, so this is still the letter that I wrote. This week, what I felt is that I'm already living in that world. A world full of amazing people who have interesting stories to tell, who treasure the gift of life, who do not fear great challenges and know the value of little joys, who have not succumbed to cynicism and pessimism, who have the character and capacity to feel all the deep emotions, experience all the wonderful ups and downs that life has to offer. You make me feel fresh what I've always felt at our organization, that along with the many things that I have done wrong in my life, I must also have done something right to be able to share the company of such amazing human beings. So thank you for the work you're doing, and even more than that, thank you for being you, for showing by example what it means to live a fully human life. It is my honor and privilege to work with you. And the reason, I wanted to share that letter and that sentiment, in addition to the fact that I could equally write it to all of you, is to stress that point that we do in fighting for a future world, get to live in it, and that is one of the benefits, I think, of this type of work that you get to experience on a daily basis through your colleagues, through the children that we work with, in real practical terms, what type of tomorrow can exist in the world. The second point here, it's up here as well, why I think this is so important to pause on this principle is that it's a real differentiation between us and I think, many, many other Montessorians, and maybe even Maria Montessori in terms of her basic theory herself. Everyone who subscribes to the Montessori philosophy regards the individual human life as sacred. And everyone who works in a Montessori classroom is working to help children lead kind of fully lived lives. The subtle difference is that for many Montessorians, and to some extent I think for Montessori theory itself, the deeper purpose is often to create a better world, to contribute to your destiny, to serve the cosmos. And at Guidepost, we too want to create a better world, but the causal relationship is in the opposite direction. We want a better world so that more individuals can lead fully lived lives. For us, that's the end to which the better society is the means, rather than the other way around. Again, it's a subtle distinction that I don't think actually comes up that often in practice, and it's not one that even I think everybody at the organization has to agree with, but it does mark an important difference in the underlying perspective that we institutionally embody. And I think it's one of the reasons that we are succeeding where so many others have failed. That we really, the particular child living this full life is for us the end, right? And then just aggregate that, right? Rather than that subordinating that to some other means. Finally, the third reason I think this is an important thematic perspective is that if we are to achieve a better world, the people driving that effort will be the ones who are fully alive, fully engaged, the people who care and want and are willing to try, people who recognize there is no alternative. A half-lived life is not an alternative. Someone who is aimless or living in a daze or on autopilot or who doesn't have deep relationships or doesn't have meaningful artistic experiences or who's living a lie or a phony experience of pretending to be someone he or she is not is not simply choosing a different approach to life. The person is choosing not to fully live. And that's a tragedy. Here's a quote by the playwright Lillian Grogg that captures this point from the perspective of fighting for life versus backing down. And it's from a fictional account of Sophie Scholl, a German student who fought in resistance to the Nazis when they were at the peak of their power. It's from a novel, but I think it's, as I say, fiction can be truer than reality. Is done by those millions who want to survive. The honest men who just want to be left in peace. Those who don't want their little lives disturbed by anything bigger than themselves. Those with no sides and no causes. Those who won't take measure of their own strength for fear of antagonizing their own weakness. Those who don't like to make waves or enemies. Those for whom freedom, honor, truth, and principle are only literature. Those who live small, mate small, die small. It's the reductionist approach to life. If you keep it small, you'll keep it under control. If you don't make any noise, the bogeyman won't find you. But it's an illusion, because they die too. Those people who roll up their spirits into tiny little balls so as to be safe. Safe? Safe from what? Life is always on the edge of death. Narrow streets lead to the same place as wide avenues, and a little candle burns itself out just like a flaming torch does. I choose my own way to burn. End quote. We're not in the middle of a war, and it's certainly not a war that seems hopeless, but all of us face the same choice. And the students we educate will face that same choice as they grow. To live fully and pursue happiness, or to be small and safe and betray one's own values for the sake of convention or parental approval, or just because your life experiences have made you passive. And we want a world in which people choose the former. And I think by appreciating this principle, one of the things we achieve is that we draw such people to ourselves. We're champions and warriors for the human life fully lived, in whatever form, time, and place it is found. The animating principle behind our work is that this individual life, when fully lived, is an end in itself, a sacred value not to be betrayed, and is the source of everything good in the world, from the medicines that save us and the technology that connects us, to the art that moves us and the civil institutions that protect us, and above all, to the human relationships that either directly or indirectly make our lives meaningful and worthwhile. So to close, I want to give you some advice, not about storytelling, but about being a consumer of stories, a listener of stories, and about relishing the amazing narratives around you. Rebecca yesterday explained how Montessori described her early work with children as her one and only true degree in pedagogy. My advice to you is to treat your work as your one and only true degree in human nature. The school setting you are in, if I may, as someone who spent 15 years in that setting, a setting with so many children, with anxious parents and earnest staff in extremely close proximity, with the many multifaceted challenges and the crazy dynamics, that setting is nothing less than a laboratory of humanity. And if you see yourself as a student of human nature, and the human beings around you as the objects of your study, if you see your DSS as PhDs of human nature, and as world-class novels in their own right, which they are, if you're on that premise that they have value to offer and the people around you are opportunities to learn, if you see your teachers, your students, and their parents and all their humanity and are thankful for the opportunity, really for the gift of having this opportunity to get, again, what someday I think you will look back and regard as your one and only true degree in human nature. And as my one final piece of advice before I close with a poem, I would say love the adults in your life as much as you love the children. As you see in the children the adults they will become, see in the adults the children that they were, and love the story of their life, a story that brought them into your life. And I think, again, this is something that makes us unique in the Montessori world, because the love, the admiration, the confidence, the benevolence, the charity that Montessorians feel towards the human child, all of those emotions are possible towards the human adult. That the adult, too, is good and capable and efficacious and beautiful and to be trusted. And I think that we can bring this. We can bring this. I think the Montessori world needs this, and we can bring this perspective to the Montessori world. And I think it is really core to why we are growing and we are succeeding, because we have that view of the human adult. Okay, here's this poem. It's called "The Side of the Road." And I think it captures the sentiment of appreciating the stories of others. There are hermit souls that live withdrawn in the peace of their self-content. There are souls like stars that dwell apart in a fellowless firmament. There are pioneer souls that blaze their paths where highways never ran. But let me live by the side of the road and be a friend to man. Let me live in a house by the side of the road where the race of men go by, the men who are good and the men who are bad, as good and as bad as I. I would not sit in the scorner's seat or hurl the cynic's ban. Let me live in a house by the side of the road and be a friend to man. I see from my house by the side of the road, by the side of the highway of life, the men who press with the ardor of hope and the men who are faint with the strife. But I turn not away from their smiles nor their tears, both parts of an infinite plan. Let me live in my house by the side of the road and be a friend to man. I know there are brook-gladdened meadows ahead and mountains of wearisome height, that the road passes on through the long afternoon and stretches away to the night. But still I rejoice when the travelers rejoice, and I weep with the strangers that moan, nor live in my house by the side of the road like a man who dwells alone. Let me live in my house by the side of the road where the race of men go by. They are good, they are bad, they are weak, they are strong, wise, foolish, so am I. Then why should I sit in the scorner's seat or hurl the cynic's ban? Let me live in my house by the side of the road and be a friend to man. That's it. Thank you.